here today to present bite-sized narratives conveying impactful narrative with emotional hooks. And give it up for Levi Buchanan.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Appreciate y'all being here this early. My original thought was to come up here and say that the key to developing successful bite-sized narratives is brevity, and then just drop the mic and walk off. But I would actually like to be invited back, and then plus there's a lot more to be said about storytelling in mobile games. But first, like I said, I'm Levi, and I'm with Chingo, and normally this is where I would do a quick introduction, but chances are good you know who we are and our mission, which is to publish the world's best indie mobile games. So I'm really honored and proud to be up here this morning to talk about two of my favorite things. One, mobile games, and the other is story. Over the last 10 years of mobile games, we found that traditional video game storytelling tricks don't really apply to the screen, whether that's because of over-the-air data limits or smaller storage or just a mismatched audience. Narrative in mobile games, to be successful, it needed to change just as drastically and fundamentally as the gameplay styles themselves, because with some exceptions, we're going for an audience that plays for only a few minutes a day and sometimes only a few seconds. It's those stolen moments that happen on like a bus ride or the bathroom at the office. So if we're going to tell stories in mobile games, we need to do so quickly and cleverly. And today I want to share with you some theories and practices for doing this. But as a base for doing so, I want to look at a few examples of successful mobile games that I think have helped define and embrace not just new play styles, new mechanics, new engagement patterns, but also how they proceeded to tell a meaningful story in just a few seconds. So, first I want to look at one of my favorite mobile games of all time, and it's not just because it's published by Chingo, but because I think it is one of the purest mobile games ever developed. Cut the Rope is true pick up and play game. Anybody just gets it within a few seconds. But it's not that purity of play, I think, that makes Cut the Rope so endearing. It's the purity in its storytelling. The little green monster down here, that's Om Nom. Now, why does Om Nom need candy? Why is he sitting there? Why is he surrounded by tricks and traps? Why are you helping him? Those are all interesting questions, but they're all completely inconsequential, because those answers have no bearing whatsoever on your enjoyment of Cut the Rope. This is a game that doesn't require a narrative with a big heavy lift. No massive world building here is necessary. Instead, the developer Zeptolab did a very, very clever job turning the narrative into the emotional connection that's developed quickly between you, the player, and Om Nom. Now let's consider that emotional connection as the narrative itself. So as the stage starts, Om Nom will lick his lips or he points to his mouth. That's your motive. Om Nom's face lights up as the candy comes down the screen. That's your promise. Om Nom gets a little worried when the candy gets swung away, usually to get around an obstacle. That's raising the stakes. And when he's finally fed, big smile. There's your payoff. So motive, promise, raise stakes, payoff. Within 5 seconds. That is a pure hit of narrative. The next game I want to look at here is Where's My Water by Disney Mobile. Now they pulled off an amazing feat here. They added a character to the Disney pantheon. Swampy has joined Mickey, Donald, Ariel, and he's done it via the trajectory of a mobile game. Now chances are good that a lot of you have played Where's My Water as well, so you know the mechanic of how you swipe to dig through the dirt and eventually get the water down to Swampy. Now as you play, you can see the little changes in Swampy's face. He gets a little frustrated if you take too long, and his face lights up when the water finally gets to him. In some respects, it takes some of the same tricks that are used in Cut the Rope. But what I want to point out here is how Disney smartly got myself and millions of gamers around the world to emotionally open up to helping an alligator, which not exactly known as the friendliest creature in the wild world, even in some of Disney's own movies like Peter Pan. So during a really short introduction before the first level, you see a bunch of frightening looking alligators in the sewers, but then the camera pans over to Swampy in his window, and he's all bright and happy. You see, he's not scary like the other alligators, so you should be open and amenable to helping him. So within 2 or 3 seconds, Disney has lowered an emotional barrier and given me an incentive, a reason to want to dig in there and really connect with this character. The third game I want to look at is Cannabalt by Semi-Secret Software. You likely know it. It's a great endless runner. In fact, it's probably one of the best endless runners out there. Now, the endless runner is an example of how in mobile, genre itself can be a narrative device. This is a game that starts in an absolute panic. It hits the ground running and it takes the player right along with it. So right there, within the first second, motive and raise stakes. Now, when Cannabalt starts, you're this little guy that's running through the hallway of an office building. Everything is shaking. Is this an earthquake? Are we under attack? You break through this glass window and just start sprinting across the rooftops. Birds are scattering everywhere. There are planes going overhead. You don't know, are these enemies? Are these allies? Why are there giant robots in the background of my city? What is happening here? These are all really, really good questions, but they have no bearing whatsoever on enjoying the game. Because honestly, at no point while playing Cannabalt do I even want answer to those questions. For one thing, I don't have time for it. If you thought the stakes were raised in the first second, wait until you're 10 seconds in, 30, 45. With every single moment this game goes by, the tension and the stakes keep getting raised. The panic that it invokes is as compelling of a narrative as any. Now, Cannabalt does have a hard narrative, but it exists outside the confines of the screen. It knows what needs to be done to tell an efficient story. But the thing that I want to make sure I get here, though, is that it's not that mobile games can only tell 2, 3, 5-second stories. I mean, although that's pretty relevant for the kind of the dip in, dip out, habits of a mobile gamer. There are ways that we can create larger narratives. Now, when I said confines earlier, I didn't mean that as a dirty word, because I think every creative person here knows that it's when you have your back against the wall, it's when you're boxed in, that sometimes you make your most creative decisions. So, what do all three of these games and many other successful mobile games have in common? It's narrative that's very, very thin, but also deep. So, have you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink? It focuses on the phenomenon of snap judgments, how the decisions that we make in a blink of an eye when we first encounter a problem or a situation are actually often the correct decision. Blink argues that sometimes we do our decision-making process no favors when we extend out that time of thinking. That gives room for mood, unintended bias, unimportant context, institutionalized thinking. All of those things can rush in and cloud the decision-making process, causing us to rethink our determinations over and over again, and eventually lead us away from that initial flash of insight. Psychologists call this concept thin slicing. It's the way that we narrowly process an experience. It's about how the first sight decision-making that we make is often more informed than we think. Now, this isn't really a radical idea. It's something that you and I do every single day. When you look up at the big menu at a deli, or when you decide that you're going to fall in love at first sight. I really, really like the elegance of thin slicing, and I find that it applies to the best mobile games out there of the last 10 years. You know, from Snake on those old black and white Nokia handsets, to Crazy Penguin Catapult on feature phones, to Cut the Rope and Contre Jour, today's multi-million selling mobile hits. These games all embraced, whether intentionally or not, the concept of thin slicing. They zeroed in on a playable concept, and they supported that concept with a very narrow but deep story. Now, of course, we all know that the nature of mobile demands this. These stolen moments that I talked about, they're not ideal for big, rich arcs of character development with giant casts. And that's why sometimes the best mobile gameplay is poorly matched up with a heavy narrative. I mean, something as pick up and play as Cut the Rope or Cannabalt. Why would it possibly be fun to sit through a 3-minute block of text, a big info dump, for a game that is only played in 15-second short bursts? Now, to be sure, I mean, a lot of storytelling requires a degree of a thin slicing. World building, the core of all narrative, requires that a writer or an artist build a basic framework of the universe where the narrative is going to take place. That framework is then filled with history, then characters, then character history. A lot of authors will actually go so deep as to start naming the character's favorite teachers from 3rd grade. So much stuff is packed into world building because at some point it may be needed to explain a character's actions or provide context for an event in the story. Or what world building will often do is it will give an author a set of self-imposed rules. so that when they reach a character's decision, they kind of know what to do. But the thing with world building, no matter the medium, whether it's book, game, movie, is that it is very rarely outwardly to the audience drawn upon. You know, for example, a novelist will slice that down, you know, to hopefully an acceptable length for a book. In a movie, a lot of great scenes will often hit the cutting room floor. But that's not thin slicing, that's just editing. In mobile, it's not enough. You need to go about 24 steps farther than that. You need to be extraordinarily judicious about what gets cut and what gets included, because your audience is often there for only just a few minutes, sometimes even a few seconds. But the key to successful mobile narrative, I think, is to not let those economics of time and scale frighten you. In fact, they should unburden creativity. These economics can strip away all of the danger zones that so many books and movies and 8-season television shows and 50-hour video games can fall victim to. I mean, because really, how many stories have gotten off track because nobody knew where to cut? Nobody had the nerve to tell a director, look, I know this is your favorite scene, got a lot of great dialogue, but you've killed the momentum of this movie. Or an author that has decided to treat performance language, has decided to treat language, you know, as a performance art. Instead, I'm going to argue that you do your audience a greater service in mobile games when you really take that universe and thin slice it down to the muscle. In fact, the muscle is not enough. You need to go straight for the bone. Find the core of your story and then deliver only on that. Now, thin slicing mobile narratives, not an exact science, but I think the most successful mobile game stories always take 3 things into consideration, and that's relevance, momentum, and voice. Relevant information only. Remember Om Nom from Cut the Rope? Was it relevant why he was eating that candy? Was it relevant to know if I was some secondary character in that story feeding him? Not at all. Because the moment I find out that I am some secondary character in that, I start having new questions. Why am I here? What's my motivation? Cannabalt's another good example. Any other game probably would have employed an opening scroll in the beginning. You know, in the year 2033, the government, and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden now I'm wondering, instead of playing the game, hey, what happened between now and 2033? Why did this world go to hell like this? I mean, this game just teased it to me, so when's it going to give me that answer? Not relevant information. All that matters in that game is that I am a man running for my life in a world going to pieces. That is more than enough framework. Everything else can just exist outside the margins, and that's fine. Let it exist there, because that's then in my imagination. There's no more need for additional narrative setup. That threatens the second part of this equation, and that is momentum. So, information or dialogue that is not relevant kills momentum. You can sometimes afford a little momentum in a novel or a movie because there's a time investment involved, but not in mobile. Thanks to its immediate nature, its flexibility in our daily lives, it's those stolen moments. If I decide to spend those on a game in, say, the waiting room of a doctor's office, and all of a sudden I'm hit with a wall of text or an info dump, something that's not moving the experience forward, I'm not going to give my next set of stolen moments to that game. Because whether we all want to admit this in this room, this stuff is considered disposable content. Mobile is cheap for the consumer. I will not toss aside a $20 book. I'm not going to leave halfway through a $13 movie. And some of my friends will even know I will finish a $5 cup of mediocre coffee. But what I won't do is finish a 99-cent game or a free game if for any reason I feel it's lost momentum. So make sure that if you're going to put narrative in these games, that isn't the thing that kills your momentum. You need to keep it simple and keep it moving. All right, third, voice. Voice is such an important element of mobile narrative because it allows you to do character development, emotional connection, plotting, and so much more without any heavy lifting via language or exposition. Mobile narrative that's told through voice of a character or a voice inspired by a setting, such as Cannabalt, that transfers the heavy lifting of storytelling over to your audience. Because if I hear something inside a very specific, consistent voice, then I am the person that's imagining the backstory of the character, why they would say that, why would they behave that way, why would they make that specific decision. I'm imagining that on my own time with my own energy, and that frees up energy for me to concentrate on the game. Now, using voice To carry a mobile narrative is a lot easier if you have an established character or historical figure, like say a Batman or an Abraham Lincoln. But voice can also come from brand or style, like Where's My Water? I mean, Swampy was not an established Disney character, but he bore all the hallmarks of the Disney style, his face, his emotion, his animations. You look at him and it evokes all these pre-existing thoughts and memories of Disney, and hopefully for you those are positive. They are for me. And so in that moment when I realize I am playing something with that Disney style, an immediate connection is formed between myself and that character, and then me in that game. There's a constant, I think, that runs through all three of these games that I've talked about, and it's practically what I almost consider the fourth tenet, and that's emotion. Emotion is probably the most relevant storytelling device because it is so instant. Emotion is the momentum that propels us and all of our stories forward. Plus, emotion is a universal thing. It requires no translation. And what I want you to do is to never underestimate the power of an expression to distill so much narrative into a single, powerful, relevant moment. And to underline that, I want to look at one of my absolute favorite faces. It's Wile E. Coyote, and in this moment, he has realized that he has run out of ground beneath him. It's that look on his face, that not again moment, pure exasperation. It tells you everything you need to know about the relationship between the coyote and the roadrunner in half a second. You see in his face the years and years of trying and the years of falling and failing. Everything in the history of those two characters is expressed in a single expression. And by doing that, not a single moment of momentum is lost in these cartoons. And it's that smart use of emotion like that, I think, that's going to take us into the next generation of free-to-play games. Because too often up to now, I think that we have focused perhaps on the emotion in the wrong way to get people engaged in our games. Guilt. Your baby tiger looks hungry. Don't you want to feed him baby tiger milk? It's only 40 zoo coins. Or the other thing that we also look at is pride. Who has the biggest kingdom? Who has the biggest farm? We've actually taken one of the 7 deadly sins, and not even one of the fun ones, and we've built a compulsion loop on that. But I think by using characters like this, or like Om-Nom, or like Swampy, using smart, thin slice narratives, we can engage positive, stronger, stickier emotions and bring people into our games, whether it's paid or free to play. Think of emotions like compassion, curiosity. What greater compulsion loop in this world is there than giving a damn about something or somebody that we have determined to be magnificent? This is something that we talk about every single day inside of Chingo, and we're using this in our games, and the response so far has been fantastic. This is Pixel People. It's a city building game, but it's not about who can build the biggest post office. It's about interacting with all the great little people running around this town. Everybody has a job. And so what you do is you clone these guys together, maybe a zookeeper and an astronomer, and you see what comes up. It's rewarding curiosity. And the reward is to push forward narrative in just little forms. You get these little hits of just silliness. And this is also one of our newest games. This is Dead Ahead. It's an endless runner based in a zombie apocalypse. Not exactly alone in that genre, but we knew by engaging positive emotions, players would become invested in this universe. They'd want to spend more time here. And the way that we did that is we didn't make all the zombies into just mindless killing machines. We instead gave some of them character and emotion, and we did it in just little hints, those little itty-bitty thin slices. And when we did this, we created a two-way conversation with our players. Over on the left here, this is who the press has kind of dubbed the free hugs a zombie. Through her expression, that thinnest of slice, we've hinted that something extra is happening here. This is not just another zombie. And people have responded to that, both players and press. They all wanted to know more. So what we did was we expanded on that slice. The developer, motivator, created this series of comics. Curiosity spun up again. You see about halfway down, we're introducing another character here called Katana Girl. Well, people wanted to know more about her. And now she is going to be featured in an update to this game coming soon. So what we've done is we engaged curiosity, a really positive emotion, and we paid it back to the player by expanding the narrative in the way that they wanted to see it happen. We created a positive compulsion loop both inside and outside the game screen. And to me, that's really the ultimate power of meaningful mobile storytelling. If your narrative is both well-planned and thinly sliced and loaded with positive emotion, you eliminate one potential source of friction between you and your audience. And if you can couple that frictionless narrative with addictive, compelling gameplay, then the sky, and hopefully the top of the App Store charts, is the limit. So that's it for me this morning. I think we have a couple moments for questions. If anyone has any.
Raise your hand if you have a question for Levi.
All right.
Looks like they didn't get enough coffee yet today.
Exactly.
All right.
Early. But again,
All right.
Thank you so much, everybody. And so, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Levi.
Take it easy.
Okay, quick break, and we'll be back on here in just a few minutes at 10 o'clock. Find out what's going on.